And now, aviation weather around Alaska. Hello, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska Aviation Weather Outlook on this Thursday, February 15th, 2024. And this outlook is for the early weekend, Friday into Saturday. And the most notable weather features we are watching have to do with this large high pressure located over northwest Canada, also impacting the Panhandle, bringing a lot of clear skies, VFR conditions throughout southeast Alaska into the central eastern interior along the Alcan border. And then we have a front that's draped here across the west side of the state in through the eastern Bering. And this front is kind of the channel by which moisture is coming out of the North Pacific and riding northward, producing areas of locally heavy snow, also some heavier rainfall, especially along areas of the Alaska Peninsula. There's an area of low pressure sitting just south of there with the front extending to the north, and this will be the area where we expect widespread IFR conditions from the western Brooks Range across the Seward Peninsula, YK deltas, Nunavik Island down across the Alaska Peninsula. As we go into Friday afternoon, notice this feature doesn't move a whole lot. It's going to have a tendency to slowly push a little further westward off of the west coast into the eastern Bering, but nevertheless, still extensive IFR from the western end of the Brooks Range, Seward Peninsula down along the YK delta into the Alaska Peninsula. Extensive high pressure allowing for very clear skies across much of the mainland and through the southeast. Now, by the time we get into Saturday, there's going to be a little impulse of low pressure and moisture that kind of rides northward up along the western Gulf. So this area of IFR will expand northward across Kodiak Island. And we still have IFR conditions from the Seward Peninsula bearing straight down across St. Lawrence and Nunavik Island, just off of the Yukon Delta coast. Saturday afternoon, notice that the IFR conditions do spread northward along the eastern Kenai on up into at least the lower portion of the Prince William Sound, as well as extending down along the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula and a broad area here just off of the southwest coast, covering much of the northern parts of the Bering Sea. So pass conditions, Friday, Anaktuvuk Pass may see MVFR conditions in the morning give way to VFR conditions. A little further east, Adigan Pass should generally see VFR conditions. And then as we drop southwestward along the west arm of the Alaska Range, Lake Clark, the furthest south, may see MVFR conditions in the morning give way to VFR. Merrill Pass, though, generally VFR conditions are expected Friday. And as we round up through the central and eastern Alaska Range, VFR conditions will rule with that high pressure influence being quite strong. Rainy Pass, VFR. Windy Pass, VFR conditions, though there could be some turbulence around the ridge lines and peaks of the Alaska Range due to the relatively strong southeast to southerly flow in the lower portion of the atmosphere. Isabel Pass, VFR, Mentasta Pass, VFR conditions, and then as we cross the Copper River Basin, Tanita Pass will see VFR conditions, and Portage Pass, VFR conditions should hold there on Friday. As I mentioned, though, by Saturday, we're going to get some of that moisture right up along the eastern Kenai from the western Gulf, and that could make it up toward the east entrance of Portage Pass on Saturday. Chilkoot and White, as well as all of southeast Alaska, should see VFR conditions thanks to this very large mid and upper level high that is sitting out there. And one sign of that feature is the freezing levels aloft. This type of system in the summertime would bring hot, dry conditions, increased fire danger, but with it being winter, we have warmer air aloft. This dome where freezing levels aloft are at or above 8,000 feet. This is where the center of this upper level high is. Now, because it's still winter, the valleys are cold. We have snow. It's 15 below zero this morning at Northway, so it still can be quite cold beneath this warmer air aloft. Back to the west, we find, as I mentioned, the frontal boundary out here along the west side of the state with the moisture feed coming in up off the North Pacific. Freezing levels have bumped upward above freezing into the southwest interior and generally run along the Gulf Coast, at least in the early morning, because we're kind of in that areas of south central are seeing this thaw-freeze cycle where temperatures get above freezing during the day but then fall below freezing at night. Icing is going to be most significant out here along the west coast and south of Kodiak Island as the result of thicker cloud cover and where the precipitation is being produced. So you get above 6,000 feet here south of Kodiak Island, there could be moderate icing. Areas all along the southwest and west coast from Bristol Bay, Kuskokwim Bay, up along the lower Yukon Basin and surrounding areas there of Norton Sound. We expect to find considerable moderate icing above 2,000 and 3,000 feet. Behind me, there's a stronger low coming in off the North Pacific, going to impact the western Aleutians going into Saturday, but the occluded front arcing out ahead of this windy and deep system could produce considerable icing above 3,000 feet. And looking at the winds aloft, here's the counterclockwise circulation of the high pressure that's situated, I should say clockwise circulation, and it's located here over northwest Canada. And we find winds along the Canadian Arctic coast at 30,000 feet jet stream levels. There's a jet core of 130 knots behind me. We have the hints of the jet core associated with that stronger low that's currently southwest of the Aleutians. And then as we go into the 9,000 foot level, 700 millibars, really strong mid-level wind field associated with that feature well southwest of the Aleutians, 75 to 90 knots. And then over here across the Gulf, a broad area of 50 to 60 knot winds, especially coming up here in the west arm of the Alaska Range, crossing the lower or the northern portion of the Alaska Peninsula and up to just north of Bristol Bay. And at 3,000 feet, we have this broad belt of southeasterly winds. Again, here's the high center over northwest Canada, British Columbia. And the circulation around the high is bringing stronger winds in the lower levels across the southwestern Gulf, southwest part of the state. Over the mountainous terrain here, west arm of the Alaska Range, we do expect quite a bit of turbulence. And then way to the west, look at this broad area of winds 50, 65 knots pushing into the western Aleutians. This is a very windy system. In fact, the center of low pressure could bottom out somewhere around 948 millibars. So that could definitely be accompanied by storm force winds with hurricane force gusts. And then finally, here's a look at the turbulence expected. Friday, there will be areas of severe turbulence across parts of the lower Alaska Range and perhaps northern parts of the Alaska Peninsula that extend inland into the southwest interior. Broad area, though, otherwise of moderate turbulence along the western Gulf, extending up along some of the ridge lines of the Alaska Range surface to 10,000 feet. And then as we trail out into the Aleutians, eastern Aleutians surface to 4,000 feet, we have winds that come around more to the north because of the circulation around the front and trough of low pressure that extends back up there along the west side of the state. And then way out here in the western Aleutians, we expect some areas of moderate turbulence surface to 3,000 feet.